Shihoko Goto is Senior Associate for Northeast Asia with the Wilson Center's Asia program. She joins us to discuss the rebalance to Asia in the shadow of tensions between the U.S. and the Philippines. Shihoko, welcome to Now. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's begin with the remarks from Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte. Did you say Duterte or Duterte? Yes. Have you looked up the pronunciation online? You get this odd thing where the U.S. pronunciation eliminates a syllable, but the rest of the world uses all three. So it's very odd.
Oh, okay. I've been saying Duterte.
Well, you're the expert, so that's why I want to check with you.
Okay.
Well, obviously, also his nickname, we know how to pronounce that, the Punisher, right? So what is going on here? What was the impetus or the starting point for a lot of his heated rhetoric toward the U.S.?
Well, you have to remember he's only been in office since June. And bear in mind that...
But this started before, when he was mayor, correct?
Yes. So he's been around in office for a while. He's really caught the American public's imagination for his very colorful rhetoric and describing the U.S. president and the United States itself, some of them which are not terribly appropriate.
He's had to promise to stop swearing. Right?
Yes. So really, one of the biggest beef that he has with the U.S. government was with its bully pit approach to what he believes is domestic Filipino issues, most notably his war on drugs. And so he has really gone against the international rule of law and taken matters into his own hands and really trying to justify the ends by taking very radical means, by taking guns and shooting, essentially, the drug lords.
Murder,
now,
yes.
It has, to some extent, been supported by the Filipino public because the streets are safer. But that is not the most democratic, sensible approach to doing this. And the United States and European countries in particular have been very vocal about his approach to this. Hence the colorful language to say, I don't care what you think about me.
So beyond heated rhetoric, how serious a divide is this between the U.S. and the Philippines?
Right. Now, it's become a diplomatic issue over the past few weeks, especially since Duterte went to China. And he's essentially said that China is a Filipino friend and that Russia, too, should be a friend of the Philippines, and the United States could go to hell.
So this is his own rebalance, in a sense.
It is his own rebalance, but if you look at it, the U.S. alliance with the Philippines goes back decades, and the U.S. alliance with the Philippines is at the heart of the U.S. rebalance to the Southeast Asian nations. The United States only has 7 major defense agreements worldwide, of which 5 are in Asia, and 1 of them is with the Philippines. Duterte is now threatening to push out all U.S. military presence from its shores within the next 2 years. Now, this is all rhetoric. We don't know whether and how he would go through with this, but certainly he's not afraid to keep on repeating it.
You mentioned that he has a fairly broad-based support among the public for his get tough on criminals or drugs. What about support for this position toward the U.S. military alliance? And also within the military, what do we know about the level of support for this?
There has been a lot of opposition to it. But again, this is a democratically elected leader. We've just come out of the Filipino election. There is going to be no referendum on this. There have been debate in Parliament about this, but it hasn't actually led to any concrete action. This is the point that the United States continues to make. However, what the United States has been trying to do over the last 5 years is to really push forward with its so-called rebalance towards Asia, to engage more with the East Asian as well as Southeast and South Asian partners. And with the Philippines turning away, this has been a huge blow to Washington's diplomatic overture to the region. And now we're seeing other countries follow suit. For example, Malaysia is becoming more closely aligned to China as well. We're seeing other countries really following that lead as well. How this will play out remains to be seen, but what we can say is that we cannot assume that the balance of power that has worked in America's favor over the last decades will continue to stay. there is question within the United States about how to move forward with this rebalance. But not only that, the other countries that are part of the rebalance, who would be presumed partners with the United States, are also questioning it. And from a Filipino perspective, as well as perhaps a Malaysian one, the best case maybe will be to play Beijing against Washington. So they get to be courted by both sides.
Sure, makes sense. Would the sort of ripple effect that you describe following Duterte's lead, perhaps, is it far enough along to call it a trend? And if it is a trend, what can the U.S. do to counter the trend?
Well, the trend of whether or not Southeast...
A regional rebellion against the U.S.'s influence.
I wouldn't use the word rebellion, because it's not really a rebellion. It's a reassessment of where they stand, what their position is in regional security and regional stability.
A reassessment usually comes if you're not satisfied with the current arrangement.
And I think there is a lot of dissatisfaction. Now, we talk about the rhetoric in the Philippines and Duterte's very colorful language. But let's take the U.S. election cycle, for instance. There has been a lot of colorful language from the United States, and there has been a lot of criticism of Americans' partners in the region from certain presidential candidates.
Donald Trump, yeah.
Donald Trump.
Right. And then Clinton, on the other hand, has tried to reassure allies. So we've had the back and forth.
Right. So we've had the back and forth, but that does not, change the matter of the fact that one leader of one of America's biggest political parties is very ambivalent, if not outright hostile, towards America's firm U.S. partners. So America's actually being called out on that by its allies. And so moving forward, it will be a test of the United States whether its rhetoric about a pivot, a rebalance towards Asia, actually has any traction. And if so, how is it going to do that? Because the world's not going to wait for the United States to make its decisions. China has its grand strategy. It has a vision for Asia. And whether countries like it or not is one thing, but it has a clear vision. What the United States has failed to do is to actually provide a roadmap for some of the proposals that it has come up with.
So a final thought, you talk about in the shadow of this election, and campaign rhetoric is what it is. For better or worse, and often for worse in these kind of scenarios. Will we have to wait until a new president is elected for this to sort out? In other words, is Obama's chance at clearly defining the rebalance over now, and we wait until a new president takes the reins?
Well, it's only a week away until the elections, and then
January till we have the actual swearing in.
But I think we already have a roadmap for how we might want to proceed to some extent. But let me throw out, we haven't discussed this at all, the trade element, the economic element. That is one of the most tangible outcomes of a U.S. rebalance to Asia, and we are not seeing any movement forward. Even though Hillary Clinton was a key architect of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, which involves 12 countries, including some key Southeast Asian nations, it seems that TPP is going to have a very hard time whoever takes the presidency moving forward. And that will lead to questioning of U.S. leadership in the region and the United States standing as a Pacific power.
Well, and we will invite you back to talk about that as it sorts out. There are a lot of big decisions to be made in the coming months. Shihoko, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.